Hello my friends, your friendly neighborhood spider critic has returned. Now today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'll be taking you for a trip down memory lane. And what better way to do so than to visit the wonderful world of animation. Mostly wonderful. Now, here's where the memory lane part comes in. Today is the start of a new series of mine. This series is completely dedicated to cancelled media, specifically animated media. This series will focus heavily on various animated projects that either never made it past development, some that managed to get some work done, or are a first draft of an already existing movie, but would somewhat count as its own cancelled project. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Animation Cancellation. This was originally meant to be a series where each episode would have a compilation of cancelled/scrapped projects, but instead most of the series will focus on one animated film per episode and only occasionally have a compilation of projects depending on the research and how far they went in development before being tossed out. Now before we get started, I'd like to lay out a few things before we get into this. One is that obviously all of these have to be animated projects I would focus on. So if it's live action, unfortunately it doesn't count. However, what does count is a live action animation hybrid, since those are only partially animated. And for number 2, if the animated project in question was one of those projects that were just announced and then cancelled with no work put into them in terms of storyboard or concept art or even a script, then I can't add that as a full episode per se, but rather I would put it in an occasional compilation episode instead. And number 3, most importantly, I will go over who was the one behind the project, when it was supposed to release, what it was about, and why it was cancelled. So without further ado, let's get down to business. So for this first episode, I originally wanted to make it a minor compilation of 2 animated films that were meant to be Lego movies by Warner Brothers, that being The Billion Brick Race and The Batman Movie 2. However, there was more details on Lego Batman 2 that just recently emerged, and they were interesting enough for me to make an entire video of, so for now I'll save The Billion Brick Race for a future episode. To explain its origins, the first Lego Batman movie received massive praise from critics and made a good $312 million at the box office, so a sequel was probably inevitable. It was further confirmed by director Chris McKay, who also worked on 3 seasons on Adult Swim's Robot Chicken, and his most recent film that literally just came out, The Tomorrow War, that he and his team at Warner Animation Group were developing a Lego Batman sequel in December 2018. It all started with a fan on Twitter not only complimenting the chef on the first Batman movie, but also asking if there's a sequel being made, to which Chris replied with, quote, "We are working on that right now, actually. In the meantime, Lego Batman is all over Lego 2 coming in February." While many fans of the franchise were excited to hear Lego Batman returning for a whole new adventure, it was further blocked by the unfortunate performance that the second Lego movie did at the box office. Despite having a larger budget than the first film with $100 million and receiving some good reviews, the movie only made $192 million worldwide, making it a box office bomb. A lot of revenue was lost on the movie, and it led fans to believe that the franchise was heading into a pretty grim future. Would there be a Batman sequel? Will there be another Lego movie for Warner Brothers? Eventually, in late 2019, it was announced that Universal Pictures was in talks with Warner Brothers to pick up their rights for the Lego movies after the deal was expired. You see, Warner Brothers had a contract with Lego that they would be making Lego movies for at least 5 years. Until then, the deal would be over. And Warner Brothers have only produced 4 Lego movies in the span of 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, and in April 2020 was where the deal was finalized that Universal will now be making future Lego movies, or at least whenever that'll happen. And with that said, where does Batman fit into all of this? Well, you see, Batman is owned by DC, in which is owned by Warner Brothers, meaning that Universal can't use Batman in one of their films because he's a Warner Brothers licensed character. Since the deal was made, many people assumed that the Lego Batman Movie 2, along with another film called The Billion Brick Race, was cancelled, and by June 10th, 2021, those rumors were actually true. As you can see, Chris McKay actually had an interview with Screen Crush not too long ago about what the new movie could have been about and what it would have featured. So with that said, what was this film about? Well, according to Chris McKay, the movie would have had a similar structure to that of, get this, The Godfather Part 2. The story would have been focused on Batman's relationship with Justice League, as well as where he was in terms of them. It also would have shown a backstory of how they met, and also the struggles they go through. And where the Godfather Part 2 vibes kick in is with Batman's relationship with Joker being more of a keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of friendship. They also had a really great part for Robin as well, which probably meant that he was gonna have a bigger role into this than he did in the first film. Interestingly enough, the writing staff was made up of Dan Harmon and Michael Waldron, in which Dan was the creator of such shows as Community and Rick and Morty, and Michael was actually the creator of the recent Marvel Studios series Loki for Disney+. To further prove this, a pitch was shown on June 14th of what the movie would have been based on. Of course, you got the obvious things it's based on, but then it gets a little more interesting as it goes on. If you look near the bottom of the pitch, you can see that the movie was also loosely based on Boogie Nights. Yeah, it was meant to parody both The Godfather Part 2 and Boogie Nights at the same time. Imagine pitching that to a studio. It also would have indicated the film being based on Super Friends, which, if you don't know, was an animated series by Hanna-Barbera that united many of DC's popular superheroes along with some obscure ones. So if anything, the movie was probably meant to be more of a LEGO Super Friends movie rather than just LEGO Batman Movie 2. And speaking of which, Chris also revealed in a Collider interview that Warner Bros. Was leery of LEGO Batman being an actual Batman movie, so he was constantly told to hold back. Until Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse happened, that proved them wrong, so that would have led him to quadruple down on making it as much of a real Justice League movie, with lots of cameos, jokes, intersecting storylines, references, etc. It would have been a very dense movie as humanly possible. And here's where the information gets a little more interesting when you read into it. According to that same interview with Collider, we had lots of great voice actors from the LEGO Movie and LEGO Batman. The villain was going to be Lex Luthor and OMAC. There's more, of course, lots of Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Lois, but there was also going to be a huge crossover at one point in the movie that can only be done in a LEGO movie, and I'm sure you can guess what it is. Followed by the sentence, the thing that will probably never happen in a live-action movie. Of course, many people in the LEGO community assumed that what he was referring to was a LEGO Marvel/DC crossover. If that were the case, it would actually make some sense, considering that in the first movie, Batman uses a password called Iron Man Sucks, poking fun at the Marvel character.
What is the password?
Iron Man sucks.
Mickey.
While that is a minor joke, you can imagine them using that said joke as more of an inspiration for what they were supposed to do in the sequel at some point. And hell, a Marvel crossover with DC is something that people wanted to see for years, and while you might say that won't happen, keep in mind, Batman had a crossover with the Ninja Turtles at one point. And then he had a crossover with Scooby-Doo a couple times. And also, James Gunn was in talks with DC and Marvel if they could just do a crossover with Guardians and Suicide Squad as well, so I'm assuming that'll be the closest thing we'll ever get to a Marvel and DC crossover, even if it might not happen. Oh well, at least we still have the comics, and also some fanfictions. As of right now, we currently have no information on how far the movie went into development or even production. Obviously, a good chunk of work was put into the writing, but aside from that, it seems like the movie was only in a certain development stage before being canned. Hell, there's no official release of when it was supposed to come out. But according to IMDb, it supposedly would have released in 2022, but honestly, I don't believe that. Because when you really think about the time it took between the sequel's announcement in late 2018 and Universal's LEGO Movie deal taking place the following year, that would imply the film's story draft being the furthest it could really go before being cancelled. Plus, the deal was already finalized 4 months after the fact. Even if the film was supposedly meant to release next year, and if now is 2021, the film would have already been near completed by then. However, this year in particular was the time for Chris to confirm the cancellation, so considering that he didn't directly confirm how far he and his crew went into developing it, despite confirming that a draft was finished, I'm assuming the sequel only had a fraction of work put into it, like maybe some concept art or even a script. But that's just my 2 cents. Maybe one day we'll have some more details in the future. For now, take this video with a grain of salt. So, why was this movie cancelled? Well, as said earlier, Warner Bros. Owns Batman. so it would be unlikely for Universal to revive the project with their new 5-year deal, which sucks because the first movie was an excellent interpretation of Batman's character, as well as being a generally good superhero movie. It may not take itself seriously, but honestly, it didn't need to. Instead, it wanted to have some fun with the clever story and great comedy, and that's what I think the sequel could have been. The ideas it had sounded like it would have been such a fun experience. It felt like it was meant to be a love letter to Batman and DC fans while also mixing in elements that make it a true Lego movie. But alas, it's only a matter of time until Universal actually does something with this deal until 2025. I mean, come on, give us a Lego Fast and Furious movie, or Lego Jurassic World movie, or fuck. I'd pay all of my money just to watch a fucking Lego Trolls movie, I swear.
Darkness. No parents. Continue darkness. More darkness. Get it?
I'm expecting a phone call! From Oscar!
Why don't you just give him the home line?
I like your ringtone better.
You just won't fit in.